G'day people, I'm Sharon, welcome to my channel. This is a Quilt As You Go quilt that I made years ago, and it's put together exactly the same way as the other quilts that I have shown you. Take two blocks, butt them up together and zigzag over the join, and then just cover the join. The difference is that these blocks were actually prepared a bit differently. The idea behind this quilt was for people to learn what the different feet on their sewing machine could do and how you could make them work. Various staff members designed different squares. By the time I put this together, none of the other people who were involved in any part of designing things were still working at the store. So I don't know if anyone else's quilt actually got finished other than mine and my customers, but there's a lot of different squares and they were for different reasons. Let's have a look at the squares. This one is using the beading foot, and I've used it to put beads on and to put some cording on as well. This square was using the pin tucking foot. Different styles of pin tucking, close together, far apart, wavy, and they've also been stitched onto the backing fabric. This one is altogether to do with the buttonhole foot and sewing buttons on. This one, once again, the beads have gone on with the beading foot, but the pieces in between, they're piping. That one, using the overedge foot. Torturing tucks, foundation piecing, reverse applique, cording foot, more tortured tucks, more foundation piecing, applique, pleating, 1/4 inch seam foot, free motion, and gathering. By the time I actually got this quilt put together and hung on the wall in the store, I was still teaching it, and I needed blocks that I could show people of the actual, what each square looked like, rather than them having to try and look at this thing that was up on the wall. So I started making the squares again, and they have never been made into a quilt, but it does help now in order to show you some of the things that I was making and how they went together. This particular square is one that I've got that is not actually made into a square. I was using Hobbs heirloom wadding. The fabric here is just a calico, what you in the United States would call muslin, and I had two pieces of fabric that I wound together, and under one of these there will be a break in one of those designs, and they were twisted together and then getting stitched down using the overedge foot. But this means that you can see it's a design on top of fabric on top of wadding, and on the back of it, that's what it was. When a block was completed, I would put fabric on the back, and in this case it's once again the calico or muslin, and draw lines around the edge of it with something that would wash out, and then add pieces to the side, so a border. Each square ended up at 14.5 inches from very edge to very edge. So the finished size in the quilt is 14 inches. That last little bit there gets covered in the join. This particular one, for some reason, is partially undone there, so you can actually see I was attaching that border piece. If you want to do a quilt like this, you need to purchase enough of your background fabric to cover the entire quilt. I also used my background fabric as the one to cover to make the tape to cover the joins. It uses quite a bit of fabric. The remaining fabrics in here, I think I bought maybe 1 meter of each one. If you're going to do that, initially I bought 5 of those. Then you need to get considerably more of one of them if it's the one that's going to be going around there, because that takes a lot of fabric as well. As it happens, when I was putting this together and I got to my borders, I did not have a lot of fabric left. So what did I do? Each of these squares, this was strip piecing and then cross cut to make the squares. So each of those is about 1 inch square. I got as much as I could out of that, so I was able to use all sorts of little bits. But I did not have enough of this fabric left to make those bits on the borders. And I needed to go out and buy further fabric to do that. I couldn't get one that matched. And then I had to make sure that I got one that was sufficiently different that it looked like it wasn't trying to match, because trying to match is worse than complete contrast. So this fabric here is actually a complete contrast. It's the only place it's used in the whole quilt, but it does draw it together because it's in the same color family and it's used in all of the borders. Most of the time I would recommend, if you're going to do something like this, get plenty of what you're going to use as your base fabrics and your contrast fabrics. And if you have to get anything else, get it as soon as possible so that you can put it into as many of the blocks as you can, because it looks odd if it's only in 1 or 2. Much better to have it in 8 or 12. The corner blocks, so where on my other quilt when I did the borders, I did across the top and the bottom, and then I did one whole strip up the side. This one I actually made corner blocks, and they've got that same piece there. So it all looks like it goes together, but it is actually put together exactly the same way as the other quilts that I've shown you. Each square butted together, zigzag over the join and cover it. Covered on the back first and then the front. Aside from using a dark fabric, it's also quite mottled, and the places where the tape is going over those joins, the thread matches reasonably well and it's just not visible. Most people don't realize until I draw their attention to it that this is actually a Quilt As You Go. And often they don't understand until I actually get squares and show them how it's joined together, just what I've been doing with it. Looks quite different, doesn't it? So I hope you've enjoyed seeing an entirely different style of quilt done quilt as you go. See you next time.